The ruins stand white against the Caribbean jungle, concrete bones bleaching under the equatorial sun. Vines crawl through shattered windows where gold-plated shower heads once gleamed. The swimming pool, big enough for a Miami resort, holds only rainwater and the laundry of squatters who've claimed these broken walls as home. This is La Casa Grande, the big house, and for decades the world has told one story about who built it. Tourboat captains still point across the turquoise water and whisper the name that once made Colombia tremble. Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine. The man who controlled 80% of the world's cocaine supply and earned $420 million every single week. They say he built this 300-room palace as his secret party mansion, a Caribbean escape where champagne flowed and cartel business was conducted beneath palm trees. They say gold fixtures adorned every bathroom, that helicopter blades once beat the air above that concrete pad, that speedboats full of cocaine and cash idled at those waterfront chalets. But what if almost everything the world believes about this place is a lie? The Colombian sun beats down on La Isla Grande just as it has for centuries, long before Pablo Escobar was born, long before cocaine cartels turned Medellin into the murder capital of the world. The island sits about 22 miles off the coast of Cartagena, nestled in the Rosario Islands archipelago, where 800 farmers and fishermen still live without running water or electrical lines, their lives revolving around sunrise and sunset like their grandparents before them. When you arrive by boat from Cartagena, dodging the tourist vessels heading to resort islands, and you ask the locals about the big white mansion hidden in the jungle on the far side of their home, something interesting happens. They don't smile knowingly and share tales of El Patron's legendary parties. They don't recall helicopters bringing beautiful women and cartel lieutenants. Instead, they roll their eyes. They're tired of the story. Tired of explaining that the massive compound slowly rotting in their backyard never belonged to Pablo Escobar at all. According to local residents, according to Colombian newspapers like El Tiempo and Semana, according to land registry documents that list Antonio Turbay as the owner, this property was built by the family of former Colombian President Julio Cesar Turbay Ayala. It was meant to be a luxury hotel, a grand vision that died when the government ordered construction halted due to environmental concerns. It was abandoned years before anyone thought to attach Escobar's name to it. But the truth never stopped a good story, and Pablo Escobar's name sells tour tickets. So how did an abandoned hotel project become one of the most famous drug lord properties in the world? The answer lies in the dark magnetism of Pablo Escobar himself, a man whose legend has only grown in the 31 years since Colombian special forces shot him dead on a Medellin rooftop. To understand why people want to believe this place was his, you have to understand the scale of what he actually built, the empire he actually controlled, the blood he actually spilled. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born on December 1, 1949, in the Colombian town of Rio Negro. His father tended a small farm. His mother taught school. They were neither wealthy nor desperate, just ordinary Colombians trying to give their children a better life. Young Pablo showed ambition early. He told classmates he'd be a millionaire by the time he was 22. The path he chose started with stealing tombstones from graveyards, sandblasting them clean, and reselling them. He graduated to forging high school diplomas, then smuggling stereo equipment, then stealing cars. In May 1976, at age 26, he was arrested by Colombian intelligence agents after they found 39 kilograms of cocaine hidden in his car tire. He bribed the judge. He walked free. The agent who'd arrested him was later murdered. This was how Pablo Escobar did business. Silver or lead, money or death, take your pick. By the late 1970s, Escobar had recognized what would make him the richest criminal in human history. Americans loved cocaine. They couldn't get enough of it. Wall Street executives, Hollywood actors, college students, the disco crowd, everyone wanted that white powder euphoria. Colombia sat perfectly positioned between the coca fields of Peru and Bolivia and the hungry markets of Miami and New York. All it took was organization, ruthlessness, and scale. Escobar provided all three. He partnered with the Ochoa brothers, with Carlos Later, who controlled a private Bahamian island called Norman's Cay, with Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha. Together they formed what the world would call the Medellin Cartel, though it was less a cartel than a loose network of competing traffickers who sometimes cooperated. Escobar quickly became the biggest of them all. He moved cocaine by the ton, 15 tons every single day flowing into the United States. His organization controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade. Think about that. 4 out of 5 Americans doing cocaine in the 1980s were snorting Pablo Escobar's product. The money was biblical. At the cartel's peak, it earned $420 million every week. That's $22 billion per year, and that's just gross income before expenses. Escobar's personal fortune hit $30 billion by 1989. Forbes magazine ranked him the 7th richest person on earth. He appeared on their billionaires list for 7 consecutive years. He owned 15 planes and 6 helicopters. He bought a professional soccer team. He purchased a Learjet just for flying cash around. His accountant spent $2,500 every month buying rubber bands to wrap the bills. They stored so much currency in hidden rooms and underground bunkers that rats ate their way through an estimated $2.1 billion every year. Escobar wrote it off as spoilage, the cost of doing business in cash. When he was on the run near the end, hiding with his daughter in a freezing room, he burned $2 million just to keep her warm. The money meant nothing. There was always more. But money alone doesn't explain the myth. What makes Pablo Escobar's story so compelling, what makes people want to believe every property rumor and every criminal legend, is the contradictions. He was a mass murderer responsible for perhaps 10,000 deaths, maybe more. He ordered the bombing of Avianca Flight 203, which killed 110 innocent people just to eliminate one political enemy who wasn't even on the plane. He waged a terror campaign against the Colombian government, killing hundreds of police officers, dozens of judges, journalists, politicians, anyone who opposed him. His chief hitman, a man nicknamed Popeye, personally murdered 300 people and helped orchestrate 3,000 more killings. 200 car bombs exploded in Colombian cities under Escobar's orders. He tortured rivals. He funded paramilitary death squads. He corrupted an entire nation's institutions through bribery and intimidation. Yet at the same time, he built housing for Medellin's poor. He constructed soccer fields in the slums and organized youth leagues. He handed out cash in the barrios. The working classes called him Robin Hood. When he died, 25,000 people attended his funeral. Some still pray to him as a saint. This is the paradox of Pablo Escobar, villain and benefactor, terrorist and folk hero, monster and myth. His properties reflected this duality. He needed places to live, to hide, to do business, to store money, to impress and intimidate. His most famous estate was Hacienda Nápoles, a 7,000-acre ranch about 80 miles east of Medellin that he bought in 1979 for a reported $63 million. He built an airport there, a heliport, 6 swimming pools, artificial lakes. He created a private zoo with hippos, giraffes, elephants, antelopes, exotic birds. Those hippos escaped after his death and have become an invasive species, their descendants numbering over 160 and spreading across Colombian waterways. At the entrance gate, he mounted a replica of the Piper Cub plane that carried his first cocaine shipment. He built a bullfighting ring that never saw a single fight, a dinosaur park with real prehistoric bones, a Formula One racing track. The estate employed hundreds of workers. Monthly operating costs ran into the millions. After his death, the Colombian government seized it and eventually turned it into a theme park. Today, tourists ride water slides past the ruins of his mansion, visit the zoo, take selfies with the escaped hippos. The property was valued at 5.5 billion pesos in 2006, about $2.2 million. His criminal empire had become a family attraction. In Medellin itself, Escobar lived in the Monaco building, an 8-story concrete fortress he bought in 1982. The building had 12 apartments. He lived in one with his wife, Maria Victoria, whom he'd married when she was 15 and he was 27, and their 2 children, Juan Pablo and Manuela. The rest of the building held 2 swimming pools, a tennis court, a panic room, a massive vault, and 34 parking spaces for his collection of vintage cars and motorcycles. Security was paranoid, steel reinforcement, guards everywhere, multiple escape routes. In January 1988, a rival paramilitary group called Los Pepes detonated a massive car bomb outside the building. The explosion shattered windows for blocks. Escobar's family escaped, but the message was clear. He wasn't safe anywhere. The Monaco building stood abandoned for decades after his death, a concrete scar on Medellin's skyline. In February 2019, the city finally demolished it. They wanted to erase the physical reminder of their darkest era. He also owned La Manuela, a 20-acre waterside retreat in the resort town of Guatapé that he named after his daughter. This was one of his favorites. The estate featured helipads, a seaplane dock, swimming pool, tennis courts, a football pitch, and a disco inside the main house. He imported trees from around the world to create his perfect tropical paradise. He came here to relax, to escape the pressure of running the world's largest cocaine empire. On January 13, 1993, Los Pepes sent him another message. They placed 200 kilograms of TNT in a bathroom at La Manuela. The explosion happened at exactly 3:47 p.m. The fireball was visible for miles. Fishermen on Lake Guatapé thought a plane had crashed. Pablo Escobar was losing control of his empire, and everyone knew it. Today, La Manuela is ruins. You can still visit the property, walk through the broken walls, stand where Escobar once danced in his private disco. But it's a shell, a reminder that all that money and power ultimately bought him nothing but a violent death at age 44. In Miami Beach, Escobar purchased a pastel pink mansion for $765,500 in 1980. The 7,336 square foot property had 4 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, an outdoor kitchen, an infinity-edge pool, and a view of the downtown skyline. Escobar probably never stayed there. It was used primarily by his henchmen as a cocaine drop house, a way station in the smuggling operation. The property changed hands several times after his death. In Tulum, Mexico, long before the resort town became fashionable, Escobar owned Casa Malca, a beachfront hideout with bulletproof walls and a secret escape tunnel. After sitting abandoned for years following his death, art dealer Leo Malca bought it in 2012 and transformed it into a 71-room luxury boutique hotel. Today, guests pay hundreds of dollars a night to sleep in rooms decorated with works by Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat, to swim in pools where cartel members once lounged, to walk beaches where cocaine shipments once landed. The dark history has become a selling point, but Escobar's most bizarre property was La Catedral, the prison he built for himself. In June 1991, after years of bombing campaigns and assassinations in his war against extradition to the United States, Escobar negotiated a surrender deal with the Colombian government. The terms were extraordinary. He would go to prison, but he'd choose the location, design the facility, select his own guards, and serve a maximum of 5 years. The government agreed because they were desperate. Escobar was killing them faster than they could kill him. He chose a hilltop near his hometown of Envigado and built what locals called Club Medellin, or Hotel Escobar. The prison had a soccer field, a discotheque, a bar, a waterfall, a large patio, an enormous swimming pool. His bedroom featured a circular rotating bed. His bathroom had a private jacuzzi. The office included cellular phones, radio transmitters, computers, fax machines. From inside this luxury prison, Escobar continued running his drug empire. He even ordered the torture and murder of 2 cartel members, Fernando Galeano and Gerardo Moncada, inside La Catedral itself. His chief hitman, Popeye, personally killed Galeano. When the Colombian government finally decided to transfer Escobar to a real prison in July 1992, he simply walked out. His escape triggered the manhunt that would end with his death. So with all these verified properties, with all this documented excess, why wouldn't Pablo Escobar have built a 300-room party palace on a remote Caribbean island? The answer is he might have. There's no evidence he owned this particular property on La Isla Grande, but he certainly built or bought properties we'll never know about. Carlos later, one of his partners, actually did control Norman's Cay in the Bahamas, turning a tiny island into a cocaine smuggling hub, complete with a 3,300-foot airstrip, armed guards, attack dogs, radar systems to detect unauthorized aircraft, a nightclub, a hotel, swimming pools, and beaches where parties raged around the clock. Escobar himself allegedly owned a property on Isla Grande in the same Rosario Islands archipelago, though whether it was this specific compound or another location remains disputed. What's certain is that by the mid-1980s, when this property was allegedly at its peak as Escobar's playground, he had the money, the need, and the megalomania to create something exactly like La Casa Grande. A place far from prying eyes, a place accessible only by boat or helicopter, a place where 300 rooms could house his growing army of sicarios, his many girlfriends, his cartel associates conducting business, a place where gold bathroom fixtures would be just another line item in a budget measured in billions. Let's imagine the scene as tour guides describe it, as travel bloggers have written about it, as the myth has grown. It's 1987. Pablo Escobar is at the absolute peak of his power. Forbes will rank him a billionaire this year, the first of 7 consecutive appearances on their list. The Medellin cartel is earning $420 million every week. 15 tons of cocaine cross into the United States every single day. Escobar has just won election to Colombia's Congress, though a minister will soon expose his criminal past and force his resignation. He's building his Robin Hood legend, constructing housing projects and soccer fields for the poor, while simultaneously ordering the murders of judges and journalists who oppose him. At La Isla Grande, construction crews have just finished what may be his most ambitious property yet. Over 300 rooms spread across multiple buildings. A main mansion that evokes the modernist glamour of Miami's South Beach, waterfront apartment chalets where guests can wake to Caribbean sunrise through floor-to-ceiling windows, a palm tree courtyard centered around a swimming pool so large it belongs in a resort, a helicopter pad because Escobar travels by air always has an escape route, gold-plated shower heads in every bathroom because excess is the point, because he can. Because nothing says power like wasting money on fixtures that will tarnish in the salt air. The island location is strategically perfect. 22 miles from Cartagena means law enforcement can't easily surveil it. The 800 local residents are fishermen and farmers who won't cause trouble, who'll accept bribes to look the other way, who have no interest in drawing cartel attention. Getting to the property requires either a special boat from Cartagena or that helicopter ride. If you somehow make it ashore and try to hike through hours of jungle to reach the compound, armed guards will stop you. Escobar maintains an army of sicarios, young men from Medellin slums who'll kill on command for a few $1,000s. His chief of security is John Jairo Velasquez, the man called Popeye because of his resemblance to the cartoon character. Popeye will later confess to personally murdering 300 people. He arranged over 200 car bombings. He helped plan the Avianca Flight 203 bombing that killed 110 innocents. He coordinated the kidnapping of politicians, the assassination of presidential candidates. At La Casa Grande, he supervises maybe 40 sicarios working in rotating shifts. They patrol the grounds with automatic weapons. They stand watch at the helicopter pad. They guard the speedboat. Dock, where a 30-foot luxury vessel costs $187,000 and is used for quick getaways or bringing in supplies. Anyone who approaches without authorization dies. No questions, no mercy. This is how Pablo Escobar maintains security. Everyone knows the rules. Respect them or disappear. Inside the compound, life proceeds at the speed of cocaine and cash. On any given weekend, helicopters arrive throughout Friday night and Saturday morning. They bring cartel lieutenants from Medellin, from Cali, from Bogota. They bring Escobar's current girlfriend because he always has one despite his marriage to Maria Victoria. Sometimes they bring politicians on the payroll, cops who've accepted bribes, judges who've ruled favorably. Everyone drinks champagne that costs hundreds of dollars per bottle. The swimming pool fills with beautiful women, models, and beauty queens because Colombia's pageant culture makes it easy for narco traffickers to meet aspiring contestants. Music pounds from speakers. The gold shower heads gleam in bathrooms where cartel members cut lines of their own product. In private rooms, business continues. Ledgers detail shipments and routes. Arguments erupt over territory and distribution rights. Escobar settles disputes with quiet words or sudden violence. His presence dominates every gathering. He's not physically imposing, 5 feet 6 inches tall, increasingly heavy, with a thick mustache and cold eyes. But everyone defers to him. He's El Patron, the boss, the man who turned poor, the man who made billions moving white powder, the man who will kill you and your entire family if you cross him. The monthly operating costs for a property like this would be astronomical. 40 armed guards earning maybe $2,000 each per month. That's $80,000 just for security. The speedboat needs fuel and maintenance. The helicopter flights cost thousands every time. Food and alcohol for 300 guest rooms. Gold fixtures require cleaning and maintenance in the corrosive salt air. The grounds need constant care to prevent jungle encroachment. Generator fuel because the island has no electrical grid. Bribes to local authorities to ensure no one asks questions. Bribes to Colombian Navy officers to guarantee no unexpected raids. All told, a property like La Casa Grande could easily cost $500,000 to $1 million monthly to operate. For Pablo Escobar, that's about 3 days of income, pocket change, not even worth tracking. His brother Roberto, who worked as a cartel accountant, later said they lost $2.1 billion annually just to spoilage, rats eating cash, water damage, misplaced bundles. If you're writing off $2 billion a year to rodents and rain, what's $12 million annually for a Caribbean party palace? But here's what the tour guides don't tell you as they point across the water. Here's what the travel bloggers don't mention in their clickbait articles about visiting Escobar's secret hideaway. Land registry documents for La Isla Grande don't show Pablo Escobar as the owner of this property. They show Antonio Turbay, a cousin of former Colombian President Julio Cesar Turbay Ayala. Multiple Colombian newspapers have reported this. El Tiempo, one of the country's most respected publications, interviewed local residents who insist the mansion was meant to be a hotel. Semana magazine published similar accounts. The story they tell is less exotic, but probably true. A powerful political family bought land on La Isla Grande in the 1980s. They envisioned a luxury hotel capitalizing on Cartagena's growing tourism industry. They began construction of a massive resort, hundreds of rooms, waterfront bungalows, a spectacular pool, all the amenities wealthy tourists would expect. But the Colombian government, concerned about environmental damage to the protected Rosario Islands, ordered construction stopped. The project died half-finished. The owners abandoned it. Tropical weather and jungle vegetation began the slow work of reclamation. And then, sometime in the 1990s or early 2000s, someone, a tour guide, a local entrepreneur, someone who understood the dark appeal of Pablo Escobar's legend, pointed at those white ruins and said that's where El Patron had his secret hideaway. The story spread. Travel websites picked it up. Atlas Obscura featured it. Photographers captured haunting images of the abandoned pool, the crumbling chalets, the jungle swallowing concrete. YouTubers made videos exploring the ruins and breathlessly recounting tales of cartel excess. Tour operators started offering boat trips to see Pablo Escobar's party mansion. Never mind that locals rolled their eyes. Never mind that no documentation supported the claim. Never mind that Escobar had plenty of other verified properties. The myth was too good. And Pablo Escobar's name was tourism gold. Some visitors even claimed to have interviewed locals who remembered the parties, the helicopters, the armed guards. But when Colombian journalists did the same interviews, residents told a different story. They remembered construction being halted. They remembered it sitting empty. They got tired of foreigners treating their island like a narco theme park instead of appreciating its natural beauty, its coral reefs, its traditional fishing culture that has sustained 800 people for generations. So why does it matter? Why not let people believe the legend? In some ways, the distinction feels academic. Whether Pablo Escobar built this specific property, or another property, or no property at all, on La Isla Grande, doesn't change the fundamental truth of what he was. He was responsible for tens of thousands of deaths. He corrupted an entire nation. He flooded the world with cocaine and built a $30 billion fortune from addiction and misery. He deserves no romantic myths, no glamorization, no tourist pilgrimage sites. But the confusion over La Casa Grande also reveals something important about how legends grow and why we struggle to separate fact from fiction when it comes to figures like Escobar. We want to believe the most extreme version of every story. We want 300-room palaces with gold fixtures because that fits the narrative of excess we've constructed around him. We want secret island hideaways because they sound like something from a James Bond film. We want the myth because the reality, while still shocking, is somehow more banal. The reality is that Pablo Escobar ran a business. An illegal, violent, destructive business, but still fundamentally a business. He bought properties for strategic reasons, to live in, to hide in, to conduct operations. He laundered money through legitimate-seeming real estate. He used multiple shell companies and nominees to hide ownership. He was less a cartoon supervillain with secret lairs and more a ruthless CEO with a property portfolio. The properties he definitely did own were remarkable enough without embellishment. Hacienda Nápoles really did have hippos and a private airstrip and cost $63 million. La Catedral really was a luxury prison where he tortured associates. The Monaco building really did have 34 parking spaces for his car collection. Casa Malca really did have bulletproof walls and an escape tunnel. These verified properties tell the same story as the mythical La Casa Grande. They show a man drunk on power and paranoia, building fortresses and playgrounds in equal measure, creating escape routes everywhere because he knew his empire couldn't last forever. And it didn't. By 1991, the war Pablo Escobar had waged against the Colombian state was costing him everything. He'd bombed government buildings, killed 3 presidential candidates, assassinated Minister of Justice Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, murdered hundreds of police officers, slaughtered judges and journalists. His campaign of terror was designed to prevent extradition to the United States, where he'd face life imprisonment in a real facility, not a country club prison of his own design. The government fought back. President Cesar Gaviria created Search Block, an elite police unit dedicated solely to finding and killing Escobar. The United States sent advisors, equipment, intelligence support. The DEA and CIA poured resources into the hunt. Delta Force operators provided training. And most devastatingly, a vigilante group called Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar, emerged in 1993 and began systematically destroying his empire. Los Pepes were probably funded by rival Cali cartel leaders and may have included Colombian police and military officers operating unofficially. They bombed his properties. They murdered his associates. They targeted his lawyers, his accountants, his bankers. They froze his assets and burned his buildings. The message was clear. This entire country had turned against him. Pablo Escobar spent his final 16 months as a fugitive. After escaping from La Catedral prison in July 1992, he moved constantly, rarely sleeping in the same place twice, relying on a shrinking circle of loyal associates. His family fled to Germany, then traveled to Mozambique, eventually returning to Argentina, where they'd attempt to establish new identities. He communicated with them through phone calls he knew were being traced, but couldn't resist making. He was lonely, paranoid, watching his empire crumble piece by piece. The man who once earned $420 million per week was now hiding in slum houses, dependent on teenage sicarios for protection. Search Block tracked him through radio triangulation technology provided by the CIA and DEA. Every time he made a call longer than 3 minutes, they got closer. His last birthday was December 1st, 1992. He turned 43. By then he must have known how it would end. There are only 2 ways out of the cocaine business at that level: prison or death. And Pablo Escobar wasn't going back to prison. December 2nd, 1993. Pablo Escobar is hiding in a 2-story house in Los Olivos, a middle-class Medellin neighborhood. He's with his bodyguard, Alvaro de Jesus Agudelo, nicknamed El Limón. That morning he makes a phone call to his son Juan Pablo, now 16 years old, and using the false name Juan Sebastián Marroquín in Argentina. The call lasts too long. Search Block triangulates the signal. They know exactly which house. Major Hugo Aguilar leads a team of Colombian Special Forces to the location. They surround the building. At approximately 2 p.m., they begin their assault. Pablo Escobar and El Limon run to the second floor. They return fire through the windows. Escobar is wearing jeans, a dark blue shirt, tennis shoes. He's barefoot when he steps onto a tile roof and tries to escape across neighboring rooftops. Bullets hit him in the torso and legs. The fatal shot enters behind his right ear and exits above his left eye. Later, his family will claim he shot himself to avoid capture, pulling a pistol hidden in his waistband. The police say they killed him in combat. The truth probably died with him. His body tumbles from the roof. He lands face up on the rain-soaked tiles. His eyes are open. Blood pools around his head. Major Aguilar radios confirmation. Pablo Escobar is dead. The hunt is over. The photographs from that afternoon show Colombian officers celebrating around his corpse, posing for pictures, giving thumbs-up signs. It looks grotesque now, but these men had spent years hunting a terrorist who'd killed their friends and colleagues. Many had watched Escobar's bombs murder fellow officers. Some had lost partners to cartel assassinations. Their celebration was ghoulish but understandable. News of the death spread instantly. Some Colombians danced in the streets. Others wept over him. 25,000 people attended his funeral in Medellin 2 days later. They waited for hours to view his body. They prayed. Some touched his coffin as though he were a saint. His widow Maria Victoria wore black and sunglasses. His daughter Manuela, 9 years old, cried throughout the service. His son Juan Pablo stood stoic and angry. In death as in life, Pablo Escobar divided Colombia between those who saw him as a monster and those who remembered him building soccer fields in the slums. The properties he left behind became crime scenes, then ruins, then tourist attractions, then cautionary tales. The Colombian government seized everything it could find, though much of his fortune was never recovered. To this day, somewhere in Colombia, buried in fields or hidden in walls or stashed in bank accounts under false names, billions of dollars in Escobar money sits waiting. Hacienda Nápoles became a theme park where families now ride water slides past the decaying mansion where Escobar once threw legendary parties. The hippos he imported for his private zoo escaped and have become an invasive species. Scientists estimate over 160 hippos now live in Colombian waterways, descendants of the original 4 that Escobar bought as status symbols. They're dangerous, attacking local fishermen, disrupting ecosystems. The government is trying to sterilize or relocate them, but the hippos keep breeding. It's a perfect metaphor for Escobar's legacy. Even in death, even decades later, his excess creates problems Colombia must solve. La Manuela remains ruins on Lake Guadalupe. Tourists visit to take photographs, to stand where Escobar once stood, to imagine what it was like when the house was intact and the king of cocaine walked these grounds. The Monaco building in Medellin stood empty for 26 years before the city demolished it in February 2019. Officials organized a public ceremony where victims of Escobar's violence pressed the button that brought the building down. Debris rained onto the street. The crowd cheered. They were erasing a scar. La Catedral, the prison Escobar built for himself, was taken over by Benedictine monks in 2007 and converted into a monastery. The disco became a chapel. The soccer field became a meditation garden. The waterfall still runs. Casamalca in Tulum became a luxury hotel where guests sleep in rooms that once housed cartel members, completely oblivious or willfully ignoring the history embedded in those walls. And La Casa Grande on La Isla Grande continues its slow collapse into the Caribbean jungle. Whether Pablo Escobar built it or not, whether he ever set foot there or not, the ruins have become a pilgrimage site for those obsessed with narco history. Until recently, tour operators ran regular boat trips from Cartagena. They'd motor out across turquoise water, past resort islands where wealthy tourists sipped cocktails, to this remote corner where white buildings crumble behind palm trees. The tours are now officially closed, the property permanently sealed, but people still find ways. They hire private boats. They trek through jungle for hours. They take photographs of the swimming pool filled with rainwater, of the broken chalets where vines crawl through windows, of the helicopter pad where weeds push through cracks in the concrete. They post the images on Instagram with hashtags about Pablo Escobar. They call it his secret mansion. They perpetuate the myth. The local residents of La Isla Grande watch this circus with weary frustration. They've tried to correct the record, told journalists the truth about the property's ownership, explained that this was meant to be a hotel, not a cartel hideaway. But their voices get drowned out by the legend. Tour operators don't want to hear that the mansion isn't Escobar's because that kills the marketing angle. Travel bloggers don't want to fact-check because the myth gets more clicks. And tourists don't want to believe they hike through jungle to see an abandoned hotel project instead of a drug lord's pleasure palace. The truth is boring. The myth is exciting. So the myth wins. This is Pablo Escobar's most enduring legacy, not the billions he made, or the thousands he killed, or the cocaine empire he built, but the mythology that has grown around him in the 31 years since his death. He's become a cultural icon, romanticized in television shows and movies and songs. Netflix's Narcos turned him into an anti-hero. His son wrote a book called Pablo Escobar, My Father That Attempts to Humanize Him. His chief hitman Popeye became a YouTube personality with millions of subscribers before dying of cancer in 2020, spending his final years giving interviews about the good old days of murder and cocaine. Tourists flock to Medellin on Pablo Escobar tours, visiting his grave, his childhood home, his favorite restaurants. The city tries to promote itself as a modern tech hub, but many visitors come primarily for narco tourism. They want to walk where he walked, see what he saw, touch the places where violence happened. It's ghoulish, it's disrespectful to his victims, and it's incredibly profitable. Properties like La Casa Grande, whether he owned them or not, become repositories for our fascination with wealth and violence. We're drawn to stories of excess, 300 rooms with gold fixtures, helicopter pads and escape tunnels, swimming pools in the jungle, armed guards killing trespassers. It reads like fiction, but it's close enough to documented reality that we believe it, because Pablo Escobar really did have hippos and airstrips and luxury prisons. He really did earn billions and lose millions to rats. He really did burn $2 million just to keep his daughter warm. The truth of his life is so extreme that any embellishment seems plausible. So when someone says he built a secret party mansion on a remote Caribbean island, we don't question it. Of course he did. That sounds exactly like something Pablo Escobar would do. But facts matter, documentation matters, truth matters, even when discussing criminals. If this property on La Isla Grande wasn't Escobar's, if it was actually a failed hotel project owned by the Turbe family, then calling it his mansion is a lie. It's a lie that benefits tour operators and travel writers, but does a disservice to history. It conflates myth and reality until we can't distinguish between them. And more importantly, it turns tragedy into entertainment. Every property Pablo Escobar actually owned represents suffering. The money that paid for Hacienda Nápoles came from American cocaine addicts destroying their lives. The gold fixtures at La Catedral were purchased with blood money from thousands of murders. The cars in the Monaco building garage were status symbols bought by a man who ordered the bombing of a civilian airliner. These aren't neutral buildings. They're monuments to violence and corruption. When we turn Escobar's properties into tourist attractions, when we post smiling selfies at his ruins, when we perpetuate myths about secret party mansions, we risk forgetting what these places really represent. They represent the 10,000 people Pablo Escobar killed during his reign. They represent the 110 innocents who died when Avianca Flight 203 exploded. They represent the hundreds of police officers gunned down because they refused to accept bribes. They represent the journalists and judges and politicians who stood up to narco trafficking and paid with their lives. They represent the neighborhoods in Medellin that became war zones. They represent the Colombian children who grew up surrounded by violence. They represent the American communities destroyed by crack cocaine, the addiction epidemic that made Escobar billions while ruining millions of lives. The ruins on La Isla Grande tell a story, but probably not the one most people think. If this property truly belonged to the Turbay family and was meant to be a legitimate hotel, then its story is about how Pablo Escobar's legend has grown so large that any abandoned mansion in Colombia might as well be his. It's about how we're so hungry for narco narratives that we'll believe anything that confirms our expectations. It's about how marketing and myth-making can override documented evidence. And it's about how local Colombian voices trying to correct the record get ignored because the truth doesn't fit the story we want to hear. The real Pablo Escobar was bad enough. We don't need to invent additional properties to make him seem more powerful or more interesting. His actual empire, his documented crimes, his verified excesses are shocking enough to sustain 1,000 documentaries. But if, against the evidence, this property did somehow belong to Escobar through a shell company or nominee we haven't discovered, if local residents are wrong and tour guides are right, then La Casa Grande is just one more example of how he spent money. He literally couldn't count fast enough. It would be one more property he bought because he could, because $30 billion is an incomprehensible amount of wealth, because when you're earning $420 million per week, you might as well buy an entire island compound just for weekend parties. It would be one more place where cartel business was conducted, where people were probably killed, where cocaine money flowed like water. It would be one more piece of the empire that ultimately killed him at age 44 on a Medellin rooftop. Either way, the white buildings continue their collapse. The swimming pool holds only rain. The chalets house squatters instead of cartel members. The jungle reclaims another piece of concrete, patient and thorough, erasing human ambition one vine at a time. In 20 years, maybe 50, La Casa Grande will be completely gone, swallowed by vegetation until nothing remains except stories. And those stories will probably still claim Pablo Escobar built it, because his name has become larger than history. He's become myth, legend, cautionary tale, folk hero, depending on who's telling the story and what they want to believe. The Colombian government would prefer everyone forget him entirely. They'd rather tourists visit Cartagena for its colonial architecture, its Caribbean beaches, its rich culture that existed long before cocaine and will endure long after. They'd rather people know Colombia for its coffee and flowers and tech innovation, not for producing history's richest criminal. But Pablo Escobar won't be forgotten. His story is too dramatic, his crimes too extensive, his rise and fall too cinematic. So the best Colombia can hope for is that people remember him accurately, that they understand the full context of his violence, that they don't romanticize or glorify what he was. What he was is this: a man born poor who became the richest criminal in history by flooding the world with cocaine. A man who killed thousands of people, including many who were completely innocent. A man who corrupted an entire nation's institutions through bribery and terror. A man who built an empire on addiction and misery. A man who showed occasional kindness to the poor, but whose overall impact on humanity was overwhelmingly negative. A man who owned properties including Hacienda Napoles and La Catedral and the Monaco Building and La Manuela and Casamalca, each one a testament to excess and paranoia. A man who may or may not have owned a massive compound on La Isla Grande, though evidence suggests he didn't. A man who died violently at 44, shot on a rooftop while trying to escape the consequences of his choices. A man whose hippos still terrorize Colombian rivers. A man whose money is still buried in fields across Colombia. A man whose legacy is complicated and dark and probably will never be fully understood. The ruins on La Isla Grande, whoever built them, stand as a reminder that concrete crumbles and empires fall. The 300 rooms are slowly returning to jungle. The gold shower heads, if they ever existed, have been looted or corroded. The helicopter pad holds only weeds. The speedboat has long since been removed or sunk or sold. The armed guards are gone. The parties ended decades ago. What remains is just broken buildings and stories, some true and some false, all tangled together until separating fact from fiction becomes nearly impossible. And maybe that's appropriate. Maybe Pablo Escobar's story resists easy categorization. Maybe the confusion over which properties were really his and which are just attributed to him reflects the larger confusion about how to remember him. Villain or folk hero? Terrorist or businessman? Monster or human? The answer, uncomfortable as it may be, is all of the above. He was complex and contradictory, and ultimately destructive. He built things and destroyed things. He helped some people and murdered many more. He made billions and died with nothing. He controlled an empire and spent his final months as a desperate fugitive. He was Pablo Escobar, and 31 years after his death, we're still trying to understand what that means. The sun sets over La Isla Grande the same way it did before Pablo Escobar was born, the same way it will continue setting long after everyone alive today is gone. The Caribbean laps at the shoreline. Fishermen cast nets the way their fathers did. Children play in the same waters where tourists once came seeking narco history. The white ruins stand silent, holding whatever secrets they actually hold, witness to whatever actually happened within those walls. And somewhere in the world, someone is planning a trip to Cartagena, looking up information about Pablo Escobar's properties, reading about a 300-room party mansion on a secret island. They'll see the photos of the abandoned pool and crumbling chalets. They'll decide they have to see it for themselves. They'll believe the story they want to believe. And the myth will continue, growing and changing, becoming less about history and more about legend, until the truth, whatever it was, disappears entirely beneath the weight of all the stories we've told.